Hi, I'm Lori with No Shoes Just Travel. Today I'm going to show you a snippet of the Eerie Harbor Ghost Walk Tour in Ashtabula, Ohio. Whether you believe in ghosts or not, this guided tour by Chris Martello tells the stories of the clashes between various cultures, the brothels, and the 52 bars along the harbor streets, along with the tragic deaths caused by the difficult lifestyle of the early settlers starting in the late 1800s. If this is your first time on my channel, please like and subscribe below. Okay, let's get this tour started at the one and only Harbor Perks in Ashtabula. So this was just a murky, wet area. And when the first vessels came, people had to actually get out and shovel their way to bring the boat over to the edge. So little by little, it got to be the beautiful river that it is. In 1830, they dredged it with oxen. Can you imagine that? And then the government got involved and they made it a more respectable depth so that bigger ships could come in. But the town started over on the east side, and part of that reason was that if you go up the hill and take a right, that's Columbus Avenue, that was the turnpike. That was a stagecoach. This to be the new future for the Ashtabula Harbor. It was a three-masted ship, and they invited the public to come. People came from all over. They were dressed in their Sunday best, women carrying babies with parasols. Kids were allowed to climb up into the riggings of the ship. Now the ship was still on the cradle, this form that they built it on, and there were some drunk men leading the cheering of this ship. So they said, "Let's give this ship a proper send-off. Let's rock it." Well, the kids were coming, they were climbing up. Roland Newell came that day. He was a little 11-year-old boy. They said, "Roland, come on up. It's a great view." So Roland joined them. All of a sudden, this ship started rocking, and it went down in the deepest part of the river. It was horrible. The kids were tangled up in the ropes. People couldn't get out, the women and children. There were 5 new graves dug after that day. Roland Newell was one of them. And on July 7th, 1921, this was the scene of a bank robbery. Just about the time when Bonnie and Clyde were making their reign, their terror across the country, a big Marmon car pulled up here, big long gangster car. There were 6 men in it. 3 of them walked inside. Mary Scala was the first employee there. They told her, "This is a holdup." She laughed. They pointed guns at her head, so she went running to the back screaming. Chris Martello was the next employee. They told him to open the safe. Now there's a safe in there, 11,000 pounds. It's still there, but it had an electric lock to it. There was no way they could open it. So the bank robbers told Achel, "Give us all the money in all of your teller windows." So they gathered it all up. They ran out here. One of them tripped over a bicycle. They got in the car. They headed out that way. Gunshot came from over at Rennick's. They shot, they fired back. Tony Bernardo came out of his shoe store. They fired at him. They missed him, but they started speeding through the town, 40 miles an hour. They said that their wheels were barely touching the ground. They got in a boat, the Mary G. They had stolen it. They went down to Nineveh Road and got into the boat. They took off. They tried to catch them. They lost them. They switched it with another boat and kept going. They thought that the money's all gone. But they went to Amherst, Ohio. A waitress heard them talking. They were dividing up the money and planning their next robbery. So she called. She got the authorities, and they came and arrested them. So they had filed a claim, and they got the money, but then they got the money from the robbers. $11,946 in the teller's cages. Back in that day, when you made $1 a day, that was a lot of money. So everything was restored, well, except for Officer Shannon. He had buckshot in his face, his tooth was shot out, and word has it that they let him go at the next council meeting. There's our base.
Wow.
I am Selma. I came to this country in the spring of 1893 with my parents and my younger sister Mamie. We stowed in a rail car the last leg of the journey. It was a long way from Vasa, Finland. I'll never forget that first night we stayed here. We slept on the floor at the police station. Officer Shannon gave us each a kick to tell us to be on our way in the morning. We shook the sleep from our bodies and we headed down Bridge Street. We couldn't believe the sights that were there. So many shops, anything you could want to buy was here at the Ashtabula Harbor. There were hotels, beautiful, huge buildings, everywhere we looked. The first stop we had to go to was to the hardware store. Now, Papa lost his knife when we jumped from the train. We couldn't go back and look for it because those railroad people don't like when you don't pay for the ride. So we met Mr. Topke. That man knew everything about this town. He told us where to go to look for a job, where to stay. He was so helpful. So Papa got his knife and we went on our way. Next we headed down to the river. The sights there were incredible. There were giant buckets swinging. There were men working all over, teams of horses pulling things. There were 5 ships being unloaded at once, 8 more waiting to be unloaded. It was incredible. From there, we walked up the hill to the Point Park, just down the way here. That's pretty much where we lived for the next few days till we got settled. One morning, I went down to the river's edge really early, and right in front of me, there was the most beautiful ship. On the side of it, it said the Welcome. And on the bow of the ship was the most handsome man. He was wearing a white uniform and he had dark hair. All of a sudden, I realized our eyes had met. I could feel myself blushing. I thought to myself, if I ever met that man, I would be the happiest girl ever. Over the next few days, I saw him several more times. I learned his name was Captain Smith. Every time I saw him, my heart would race. I thought, could this be love? Huh, I'm only 16. Well, almost 17. Pretty soon, Mama and Papa started talking about moving on to a place called Minnesota, a place where other Finnish families would go and settle. I begged them to let me stay here. I love this town. I even went and got a job. I got a job at Mrs. Mackey's boarding house. She really needed the help. Her husband had recently died. They say that he was stabbed to death here at the harbor. So Mama let me stay. They went on. One day we were expecting a special guest at the boarding house. We fixed up that downstairs room. We put doilies on the little tables, Mrs. Mackey's best quilt, and the room even had a radio. Well, when the special guests came, you won't believe, it was Captain Smith. Every time he sailed in, then he would stay there. We got to be the best of friends. We would talk and laugh for hours. One day I got finished working and I walked up the hill here, and right on the other side of the street was a big stable. I love to go there and pet the horses. And I was sitting on the bench out front and Captain Smith came along. And we sat on that bench and talked and talked. All of a sudden, he looked into my eyes and kissed me. I didn't want it to end. He said, when I come back in the spring, We'll go to the Woodland Beach Park. It was just across the way. That sounded great. He left on October 23rd, 1893. 2 days later, I learned that his boat was in a horrible storm, and he went down with the ship. People in this town said that they saw me at the river's edge for the next 2 years, every night standing out there with my lantern, waiting and watching for Captain Smith on the Waukoken to return, but it never came back. That winter, the cholera hit this area. People were really sick. Some families lost 2 and 3 children in the same week. I died on December 25th. It was Captain Smith's birthday. If you go to the river's edge during the full moon rite, you may see me there, but I may not be alone. I could be with Fred Rogers, who fell from a 70-foot hoist and hit his head on the railroad tie. He was to be married that fall. Or L.G. Noter, who fell into the gears of a Hewlett machine. Sad part was he lived for 2 hours. Or maybe Happy Jack, that sailor who had his leg sawed off. We're all here, the ghost of the Ashtabula Harbor.
Wow, doesn't Chris do a wonderful job telling the history and getting into character at the Eerie Harbor Ghost Tour? If you want to take this tour with Chris, give her a call at the number below and tell her that Lori sent you. See you next time.